I guess we'll get underway. It is just a real pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Chris Stegall, and I'm here with my friends and colleagues at the Herzog Foundation. I want to thank you so much for welcoming us here to Wisconsin. It's our first. My wife and I came together. My wife, Christine. Where did you just sit? There she is. That's Christine. And the reason that Christine came along is not just for the free trip, but because Christine and I actually host a brand new podcast that the Herzog Foundation has invited us to partner with them to host and begin, called Making the Leap. And that name was born out of what she and I decided to do in this last year. And that was make the leap into a private Christian education for our daughter. To tell you a little about us, my wife and I moved to Philadelphia from Kansas City about 11 years ago or so, and we enrolled our three kids in a public school. My wife, Christine, is a former public school teacher, and we did what I think a good majority of American parents do. Put them on the bus, sent them off to what we thought was a great public school, and that was the way we just did it for years and years and years, because that's just what you do. And then COVID. And I bet every one of you has this story or some version of it, right? And then COVID. And it didn't matter where you lived. It depended on, I guess, who was governing the state, perhaps, in terms of how aggressive it was. In Pennsylvania, it was bad. And what we learned, what was so amazing was, during that time, that was Christine's ability to teach. We had a friend that decided, since the kids were learning virtually, they still had to work. The kids came to our living room and sat as Christine monitored our three children and their two children. She had a little schoolhouse in our house of 5 kids on computer screens. Not only was it horrifying to hear what we were hearing coming out of those computer terminals, it was just an untenable situation that went on and on and on for well over a year. And then when we finally did return to some semblance of normalcy with the kids, they were, of course, behind masks. And I'm sure you all had your share of those debates, too. It just became, after a while, as Christians and as people who valued an education that was not radical and the ability for kids to get together, it became untenable to my wife and myself. And so we decided to pack up. We packed up, literally packed up. We moved back to Kansas City. Were some friends of ours and colleagues of ours that we happen to know. We became affiliated with the Herzog Foundation, and we told them our story about enrolling our daughter, our youngest daughter. Our sons are a little older, so they're about to finish high school, but our daughter was 13, entering 7th grade. And we felt she had far too much runway ahead of her, and that's when we decided, you know what, we need to act. And so we enrolled her in a private Christian school, and I have to tell you folks, any of you that have experienced this for your own children, the difference it's made in her is supernatural. You can feel the Lord at work in her life and in our family, and it was the best decision we ever made. And the only thing that we regret as parents is that we didn't do it for our boys too. And if we had it to do all over again, we would certainly have done it differently. And so I think I speak for Christine when I say that we are now so honored to be a part of the Herzog Foundation and this podcast and trying to share our story and encourage, and I hope you'll speak with Christine and myself after this tonight. Let us know what you're up to here in Wisconsin. We'd love to feature you on our show. Our hope with this podcast is that we will spread this story. And for tentative parents who are nervous about this, and this is difficult for people. It was difficult for us to make this leap. We're hoping to empower parents, and that's why you're here today, to empower parents, encourage them. This doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to break the bank. It can be affordable. It doesn't have to be scary. And frankly, as we like to say, it's okay to be a little weird, right? Be a little out there, break the norm. It's for our kids, and isn't that the most important thing? It's not about our comfort. It's about our future and our children's future. So if you're so inclined and you're interested in this podcast, we've got a little flyer there on the table next to our hosts, who we thank you so much, you ladies, for being our hosts tonight and bringing the merchandise. But we've got a flyer on the table. You can scan the QR code and subscribe to the podcast, and I hope that you will. Our goal is to help inspire other parents to take the reins for their kids' education. And again, our hosts tonight, the Herzog Foundation, who make this entire thing possible, dedicated to advancing and supporting quality K through 12 education across the country. Excited to partner with them on this podcast, but we really hope that it will be a resource, not just the podcast, but the foundation at large will be a resource for Wisconsin parents and parents across the country. The Wisconsin chapters of No Left Turn in Education. Some of you, are you here tonight? You are here. Ilana Fishbein, who is the founder of No Left Turn in Education in Philadelphia, was a guest on my radio show for a number of years. I still host a radio show in Philadelphia, talk with Ilana a lot. She's done tremendous work around the country, as you well know, and so great to have you all here. And the American Federation for Children, also here this evening. Great to see you, sir. Thank you for being here. Co-hosting tonight's event along with the Herzog Foundation. I also want to recognize some folks in the House who stopped by. I thought this was notable. Tim Michels, who is a Republican candidate for governor. Saw him on we came back from dinner last night, saw him debating. That was kind of neat. I'm a Missouri guy. I said, I can't vote for you, but it's neat to meet you. I got a picture just in case he wins. So that was neat to see Tim Michels stop by. And Roger Roth, candidate for lieutenant governor. Mr. Roth, thank you for being here tonight as well. We appreciate you taking interest in parental rights and a future in our kids' education. So a great group of speakers tonight, folks. You're in luck. You have some great folks and some fighters here on the ground in Wisconsin. And I'm excited to welcome our first speaker, Luke Berg. Luke's a father of 3. He's deputy counsel for the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, otherwise known as WILL, W-I-L-L, which is easy for me. That's our oldest son's name. That's cool. Luke joined WILL from the Wisconsin Department of Justice, where he served for nearly 4 years as a Deputy Solicitor General and Assistant Attorney General. Luke's argued 9 cases before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, 4 before the 7th Circuit. He's played an instrumental role in several of WILL's parental rights cases, including Alexandra Schweitzer's case. And we'll be hearing also from Alexandra a little later tonight. But please welcome to the podium our first speaker, Luke Berg. Mr. Berg.
Well, thank you so much for having me. The pandemic, I think, really gave us parents a window into what's happening in our schools. And I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of us. There's been a shift in some circles from viewing school as a partnership with parents to this statist and I believe misguided view that parents are the problem for which public school is the solution. Schools seem to be spending more and more time and energy indoctrinating our kids with the latest soup of the day rather than the foundation they need to function successfully in society: reading, writing, math, science, history, art, and music. Don't get me wrong, I think most teachers are good and are there to teach and serve, but there seem to be more and more bad apples suggesting a deeper cultural problem. The number one thing we need to right this ship is you, parents. Parents who are vigilant, who care enough to pay attention to what's happening and then do something about it. Parents who are willing to fight for their schools and their kids. Sometimes that means filing lawsuits. For example, we successfully sued the Dane County and Racine health departments to keep schools open when they tried to shut down schools during the 2020 school year, and we got the Kenosha Health Department to back down when they threatened the same. We have two lawsuits currently going against the Madison and Kettle Moraine school districts, both of which have policies to exclude parents from the major decision about whether their child will transition to a different gender identity at school. Both those cases are ongoing, but we've had some early victories, winning a motion to dismiss in one and a partial injunction in the other. And those cases have inspired others. There are now 13 similar cases around the country on the same topic. We are also suing the Madison School District for refusing a simple open records request for a single thing, a training on gender identity that it gave to all of its staff, something you think that the public should have access to. Now, I know litigation can be an intimidating thing, but these cases would not have happened unless we had parents willing to engage in the fight by being plaintiffs. Sometimes legal issues come to you even though you don't want them, and fighting back means mounting a good defense. In Kiel, Wisconsin, we successfully represented the parents of 3 8th grade boys who were charged with sexual harassment for quote-unquote mispronouncing, using she/her pronouns when referring to a female student rather than the student's preferred pronouns of they and them. In Oconomowoc, we successfully represented Allie Schweitzer, who you'll hear from later, Her school district threatened her with a defamation lawsuit for speaking up about some of the books available in her district. In both cases, the families defended themselves publicly with our help. But why publicly? Because fighting back quietly doesn't change the culture that spawned this. These parents never sought out media attention, but when wokeness came for them and their children, they had the courage to speak out publicly against it. That's how we change things. Sometimes even a public letter from Will or another organization is enough to win a fight. In Mequon, for example, when some parents campaigned to recall members of their school board, the city tried to prevent them from putting up signs to support the recall, a clear First Amendment violation. We sent a public letter and the city backed down. In Kenosha, a parent wanted to observe her son's class, as she has a right to do under federal law. The school refused, so we sent a public letter and the school backed down. In Elmbrook, a group of parents discovered sexually explicit books in their library and on an app. We sent a public letter and the school backed down and removed the materials. Some issues, however, can only be fought politically. As I often tell parents, not everything bad in the world is illegal. So we need engaged parents showing up to school board meetings, monitoring curriculum, reviewing policies, maybe even running for school board. And we want to be a resource for parents like these in these fights as well. And one of the great advantages of Will as an organization is that we have both a litigation half and a policy half. Our policy team recently released what we're calling the Restoring American Education Project. The goal of this project is to provide resources like model school policies from a pro-parent and pro-transparency perspective. We'll soon be releasing research and resources for teachers who are looking for alternatives to the woke ideology coming from teacher prep programs and their administration. If you want to follow the project or get more information, it's on our website at will-law.org/restoringed, restoring ED. We are proud to represent and fight for parents like you. I'll be around afterwards to speak with anyone who's interested in any of the issues I briefly mentioned, and I could talk in depth about any of them. But I want to conclude by just thanking you all, primarily for coming to an event like this and for being a parent who cares. Nothing will change without parents like you who aren't afraid to speak up and fight back against these issues. Thank you.
Luke, thank you very much. He is so right, and shameless plug once again for the podcast. We've interviewed so many incredible parents, and if I may brag on my wife for a moment, she's one of them. She was one of those parents that went to a school board meeting, told me she wanted to go and speak, and it terrified her. She's a school teacher, a public school teacher of many, many years, and she doesn't mind speaking to middle school kids, but when she gets in front of a group of adults like this, right, you're a little, not always your wheelhouse, that's fair to say. She's learning. But what was so cool, and you all know this, I'm only bragging on her to tell the story that I know you all know. All it takes is a couple of committed parents in a school district to stand up for what is right, and isn't it amazing how magnetizing that is for others who agree? It just takes one or two, and what I saw in my wife, the growth in her speaking up publicly and then leading, really, it wasn't a plan, but so many other parents came to her, started asking questions, and so those of you in this room, my point is that that's obviously what you're doing. You're leading in your own communities, and you're to be commended for that work. So I do hope you'll listen to the podcast only because we highlight so many of these voices, and the number of school teachers who are leaving schools to open their own schools or teach in private education settings. It's remarkable. We tell a lot of those stories, and there'll be more. So I hope you'll join the podcast. Our next speaker, Scarlett Johnson. I thought for a minute it was Scarlett Johansson. I was like, that's really impressive. I thought we had some pull. Scarlett's a mother of 5 and the chair of Ozaki. I hope I said Ozaki. I'm going to screw up. I have about 30 different names in this. I'm just warning you. I'm going to screw most of them up.
Say it again.
Yeah. Ozaki. Well, you know what? We'll have to meet after because I've got a phonics problem with most of these names. Talk about needing education. I got to go back. I wasn't raised in I'm a public education kid, so Maybe that's why. Anyway, she's part of the chapter of the Moms of Liberty at that place with the O, which is a non-profit organization that advocates for parental rights in schools. Scarlett was one of the organizers of an effort to recall, and here we go again. I'm going to get this, though. I practiced this. McQuan Thiensville. School Board. Yes. That's 3 of 7 different ones that I've been looking at tonight. In an effort that drew national attention, by the way, the incumbent school board members survived the recall attempt, and when Johnson and other reformists ran to replace 2 members of those whose terms expired, they were defeated by a former school board member and an education bureaucrat. But she remains undaunted, nevertheless, and is still active, trying to reform the district. And we welcome her to the podium now, Scarlett Johnson. Scarlett!
Hi. Luke already brought up some issues because before I started this speech, I just wanted you all to be aware of the murky waters in which I navigate every day, as does Allie, as do many other parental rights activists, just so you could understand what time it is. So this is most recent. This is in Wauwatosa, first grade teacher. Asked me about my pronouns, and he created a post in which he excitedly exclaimed, he taught his first grade students all about pronouns, and now they all want to start to use pronouns in their conversations. I simply had the question, maybe they should know what a noun is first. To which I was called homophobic and all of that. But this is a book that's in Sora and this is a new one for K-5. It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity. One of the pronouns in this book is tree, so that your child can be. Here's the illustrator. She, her pronouns. Be sure to get that right. Or you might get a formal complaint like Kiel. 2 middle school boys had a formal charge of sexual harassment because they mispronounced one of the students. And you can see here some pronouns. Z, tree, zer. It's clown world. It really is. Here's a good one. If your parents aren't accepting of your identity, I'm your mom now. Posters all over the Eau Claire School District. Another Pride Month, Drag Queen Storytime Hour. That's in Eau Claire as well. A popular new children's book, The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, 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 meant for preschoolers. And this is the school, Oak School in Birmingham, Alabama. So that's just a sample. Sauk County Drag Queen Storytime Hour. Here is another Wisconsin in Fort Atkinson Farmers Market. This is for children, young children. So this was children posed. Children put dollar bills in their G-strings. So it can be hard, it can be sad, but our kids are worth fighting for, so that's what I'm called to do, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say that I kind of started off with this. Charlie Kirk often starts off his lectures by asking the crowd, do you know what time it is? Meaning, do you know your purpose? Are you ready to make the choice to use your voice, charge ahead, and say, come what may? I am part of a movement of ordinary parents whose outrage was turned into purpose. We know what time it is. And for those of us who understand the cultural and political landscape upon which we tread, our job is to figure out what to do about it. Some prefer to be keyboard warriors. Those folks like to criticize me for my boldness. And while I try very hard to be a joyful warrior, to slay all day while holding a plate of cookies, I'm not perfect, I mess up, but at the end of the day, I prefer my way of doing things than their way of not doing anything. I listen to myself talk sometimes and I'm still like, wow. 2 years ago, I was a regular mom of 5 kids, suburban mom, driving around in my Honda minivan. About this time, I would be at the pool with the kids, arranging play dates. That was my world, that was my life, and then came COVID. And now I'm a grassroots parent activist and leader in the Moms for Liberty organization. This organization, over 19 months, started in Florida by regular moms, has become a national phenomenon with over 200 chapters and 100,000 members in 38 states. As it turns out, what happens in Florida is not going to stay in Florida. And reform in education, like the reforms vetoed by current Governor Tony Evers, will soon be in place throughout our country because parents are the new voting bloc, and soon Wisconsin is going to have leadership focused on creating strong, robust schools that educate, not indoctrinate. So again, my story started COVID. Kids were isolated. They were masked. They were shamed, humiliated, and indoctrinated. To this day, students are bargaining chips. They're pawns forced to play their part in woke performative theater. But here's the good news. I come to you with good tidings of great joy. I am a parent on the front lines, and parents across this state have a message for elected officials who continue to sacrifice our kids' well-being for their political ends. This is the era of parent empowerment. This is the year of the parent. Your day of reckoning has arrived, and you're fired. Now, some of you are thinking, why'd she go and get political with education? And I deal with that question a lot. The truth is, school board members are elected. I ran for office, I know. And school boards have legislative committees, and school board associations lobby and influence elected leaders. State representatives write policy. Governors have huge influence over education. And the Biden administration is sure intent on using education as a tool for political upheaval. The fact is, education is political. Teachers' unions are political. Leftists are funded by teachers' union. You know who doesn't have a huge bankroll and an army of lobbyists in Madison? My kids, okay? My children have no voice in the halls of the state capitol unless we give them one. It's disingenuous to say, I can't be political. It's foolish too, because while you're running around not being political, the other side is laughing all the way to the state house, to the governor's house, to the White House, and to the schoolhouse. Allie Beth Stuckey said it best. Politics matter because policy matters because people matter, and policy affects people. Now, not so long ago, I didn't even know the names of my school board members, but I sure learned their names and led a successful recall of 4 of them, collecting over 18,000 signatures in 60 days. I also worked with elected leaders on legislation with Will as well, and that legislation was aimed at affirming the authority that should naturally exist between parent, child, and school. I ran for the school board twice, and now I didn't win. But that actually is not good news for the radical leftists who desperately tried to take me down. Boy, they did. Their personal attacks helped me grow thick skin. Negating the legacy media narrative, well, that honed my ability to debate their straw man arguments. Their ridiculous denials and lack of transparency required me to do countless hours of research, making me an expert in woke indoctrination. Heck, I'm so good, I can sniff out critical race theory better than Joe Biden can sniff a young girl's hair. So what was meant for evil, God used for good. And I realize now that all the trials and obstacles, the losses, the wins, the joy and the pain, all served a deeper purpose. Had I won, I would not be here now. I would not have a larger platform upon which to thwart the effort of those who have a different purpose of my own, one that is driven by a worldview that we must expose and we must prevail against. Believe it or not, I think we should count it joy to be in this fight. How lucky are we to be born in such a time as this? Our country stands on a precipice, and we have the opportunity to leave this world better than we found it. This is our moment. K-12 education is being held captive by activists who view schools as the vehicle through which they can once and for all settle ideological disputes. They use our classrooms as an incubator to create social justice warriors. The equity consultant class holds millions of children captive to a pedagogical approach that is critical of Western values. And educators, sometimes against their will, find themselves teaching counterintuitive, anti-liberal worldviews to students who don't have the capacity to fight back and resist. So what this moment demands of us is bravery. No matter how much your parents taught you about bravery or how hard you have practiced in your life and studied to be brave, you never know if you really are until something happens. When you arrive at that moment, President Reagan said was a time for choosing. My dad is a Marine who, after 9/11, despite his age, his records were on microfiche, he had to collect them. He sought active combat duty. He did 2 tours in Iraq and another in Afghanistan. To me, that's what bravery looked like. But my dad changed my mind. He watched me and encouraged me as I battled school boards and activists, media, teachers, unions. Heck, the entire Democratic Party apparatus came against us in Mequon, Thiensville, against just a group of moms who had signs and duct taped. You know, it was funny to have the AP and New York Times follow us around, just trying to find where that dark money was. And I told them if they find it, could they let me know, because I really could use it. But my dad said, you know, to me, one day, my toughest time was when front page of our local paper was Scarlett Johnson's a white supremacist. I'm Puerto Rican, yeah, but I'm the first Puerto Rican white supremacist, I guess. I'm a really bad one. And I called my dad crying, and I thought, you know, maybe I need to quit. This is hard. This is hard on the kids. This is hard on my husband. And he said to me, you can't quit, Scarlett, because all these kids, your kids, and these parents are depending on you. And I know it's really hard, but you're a fighter, and you're the bravest person I know. And in that moment, I learned that we all, in our own small way, in our own small corner of the world, we have the chance to be brave. We have the opportunity to make a difference. All we have to do is take the chance. And if we do, we will be forever changed, and in a good way. So in conclusion, I was born to a 14-year-old Puerto Rican teen with an 8th grade education. We were desperately poor. My first crib was a dresser drawer. My dad was a gang member who joined the Marines to avoid a jail sentence, and that changed his life. What was pivotal for me was my parents' love for America and their commitment to my education. I was raised to believe that this was the land of opportunity, and that anyone, even a desperately poor, brown-skinned girl with unruly hair and hand-me-down clothes, had an opportunity to be anything that I wanted to be. And a story like mine can't happen in a vacuum, and it will become rare if we, the parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, and just anyone with a pulse, don't fight for children. We have to be their voice. We have to be the voice of the voiceless. Because, you know, I didn't think it was my place loses in every history book ever. Don't rock the boat loses in every history book ever. So summoning the moral courage to take action is not something we should think about and consider. It's something we must do. This is our time for choosing, our time to answer the call and start our hero's journey. This is a battle for the hearts and minds of future generations. And in my opinion, they are worth fighting for. So thank you.
Okay, Scarlett is way cooler and more impressive than Scarlett Johansson. You can keep the other one. You know what's also cool too? I'm just curious. Is it standard issue? My wife also drives a Honda minivan. They are great cars. It's like the car of the warrior mom, the Honda minivan. I don't know if they like that. That's awesome. Thank you, Scarlett. That was so tremendous. Our next speaker is the executive director of the 1848 Project, a nonprofit organization that identifies and promotes effective solutions to Wisconsin's most pressing challenges. In just 2 short years, the 1848 Project has established itself as a premier organization for conservative ideas and action in the Badger State. Tonight, she's going to share more about the 1848 Project's educational priorities, so we welcome Bonnie Lee. Bonnie.
Thank you so much. Oh, sure. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris. And thank you to the Herzog Foundation for inviting me this evening. It's an honor to be here with the speakers who are really touching our hearts, so thank you so much. All right, as Chris said, I'm Bonnie Lee. I'm the executive director of the 1848 Project. We are a nonprofit advocacy organization. We're working to expand the conservative movement in Wisconsin. We have a special focus on equipping candidates to connect conservative principles with sound policy. So just a little bit of history here. The 1848 Project was founded by Rebecca Clayfish in 2020 to produce the next conservative agenda in Wisconsin. To do that, she traveled around the state, hosting many listening sessions, and through that, 7 big pillar issues bubbled up as the most concerning to the people of Wisconsin. Those were education and health care, reforming government, reforming elections, public safety, workforce and economy, along with the values that we hold dear. This was called the Forward Agenda. And when I came on in September of 2021, I was tasked with getting these issues out with policy ideas, as I said, that are rooted in conservative principles. I was a candidate in 2020. I ran for state assembly. And so, like Scarlett here, and I know we have other people in the room who have run for office, some have won, some have not. I did not win my election, but candidates are close to my heart. And I will tell you, as somebody who had to learn a lot drinking out of that fire hose, that proverbial fire hose, I would have just done almost anything to get my hands on very practical Wisconsin-centric policy education. And so that's what we're trying to put out. We have on our website, if you were to go there, you would find a lot of interviews that we have done with state leaders. You would find webinars and training that we have offered, and you would find about 30 policy papers. These are in a one-pager format. They are laid out with a problem and a conservative solution to those problems so that candidates can actually print those off and learn about what's going on in the state, learn what's going on in other states. So we're here tonight talking about education. We have written a lot on education because it is such a pressing issue, as we all know in this room. Some of those papers are on topics such as these, and I'm just going to give you a few of them. Education dollars should follow the child, not buildings or bureaucrats. Let's raise academic standards, starting with civics education. Guarantee parent and taxpayer access to curriculum. Increase access and transparency to school budgets. Protect the integrity of youth athletics. Create one uniform program for school choice and expand the circle of charter school authorizers and others. So as you can see, we take education very seriously. But as conservatives, we go beyond that. We believe that education and the family are the primary transmitters of values to our children. Can I hear an amen for that? All right, great. I'm a Baptist, so I need that feedback every once in a while. Russell Kirk, often called the father of American conservatism, wrote, "The conservative feels that the family is the natural source and core of any good society." At 1848 Project, we invest in future leaders. We want leaders who will help to create flourishing societies. We want leaders who will not impede the parent's role as primary in the formation of their child's intellectual development. So, as we all remember, Virginia Governor McAuliffe, when he said out loud what was actually in his mind, and we all suspected was in his mind, that parents should not tell schools what they should teach, he essentially ignited a movement around the nation, well, one that was actually already afoot. Pro-parents came out and they got active. And he essentially ushered in a new governor that was pro-parent to the state of Virginia, right? As this recent survey indicates, what his misstep did has had terrible implications. Are you guys getting a little bit of feedback when I'm talking now? Maybe we could take that down a bit. Okay, how's that? Is that a little better? Not as much feedback. I can tell when people start looking at me like that. So in this recent May poll that was done, survey that was done in 7 battleground states, including the state of Wisconsin, the question was, which party would you trust more on education? And believe it or not, this go around, Republicans had the advantage, which set off alarm bells. And the Democrats have created a 4-part communication strategy on this, training up their candidates on how to deal with this issue. So first of all, frame Republicans as politicizing education. Second, emphasize Democrats' preference for investing in schools. Third, highlight the most extreme proposals from conservatives. And fourth, this is rich, reinforce the idea that parents have an important role in ensuring their kids get a good education. All right. Well, but don't be surprised if you do start hearing Democrat candidates identify Republican politicians, not parents, as the threat to public education, because they realize McAuliffe really messed things up there. All right, back to what we're doing. What's at stake here? What is it that we all care about here? We want schools to not be antagonistic to parents' values that they're trying to inculcate in their homes, right? We also realize that schools are often antagonistic to the very role of the parent, hiding things from parents. So back to Russell Kirk. He prophetically warned that the first technique used to undermine the family is taking the instruction of children entirely away from their parents by the official adoption of theories that prescribe educating the whole child in the state schools, while disrespecting parental intelligence and rights. Does that sound like anything? Friends, we do believe there's a role for public education, but let's be clear, the purpose is to produce an educated citizenry. Both of those concepts are important. Educated people who are good citizens. So, when our state report card continues to downward spiral, and when many students don't even realize that they live in a democratic republic, don't know what that means, and when too many of our young people are graduating lacking the basic knowledge and skills to be able to support a gainful living, then we, as taxpayers, we must demand a better return on investment, right? We must elect principled leaders, and that is what 1848 is trying to do, is to make sure that we put forth conservative principles in sound policy suggestions. So in closing, 1848 Project will continue to amplify conservative values, the ones I've just spoken about. We'll continue to invest in candidates. We'll continue to hand down the values that reinforce freedom for all, because it's critical, because much is at stake. In closing, as former President Ronald Reagan wisely stated, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend this sunset years telling our children and our children's children that what it was once like to live in the United States where men were free. Dear Lord, let it not be so. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bonnie. Our next speaker joined the American Federation for Children in March of 2016, works as the Wisconsin State Director now. The American Federation for Children seeks to empower families, especially lower income families, with the freedom to choose the best K through 12 education for their children. They're responsible for coining a phrase you may have heard before, which we really like, and we want to use more on the podcast actually. Fund students, not systems. Outside of education reform, Justin has been active in local politics, serving as the president of the Common Council for the city of Cudahy. You know, like I come from a town called Kearney, neighboring Smithville, Kansas City. You know, things people can say. No, I'm kidding. No, say it one more time. Hey, thank you. Everybody knows it. Show-offs. I even went to a Brewers game and everything yesterday. I was trying to get into local flavor. Anyway, chairman of a number of committees. He's involved in various other civic organizations. He was named one of the 39 most influential Latinos in Wisconsin. So another white supremacist in the room. That's really good. It's a joke. It's a reference to Scarlett's speech. It's a reference. But that's awesome. He's one of the most influential Latinos in Wisconsin. One of 6 need-to-know people in Milwaukee, by the way. I need to know him to pronounce where he comes from, apparently. And he's nominated as a rising star in politics 3 years in a row by the Shepherd's Express annual Best of Milwaukee series. So he's an impressive gentleman. Please welcome Justin Morales. Mr. Morales.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Justin Morales, and I'm the Wisconsin State Director for the American Federation for Children. We are a national organization focused on parental empowerment and school choice. And to Scarlett's earlier point, we are the lobbyist arm for children. And I can tell you, as someone that's deeply immersed in this movement, that there has never been a better time to be an education advocate. And that's because of you, the parents, the grandparents, and the people who just want to see a better future. It is your commitment to the children that continues to see this moment grow. And it will grow, providing that we continue this fight outside of this room here today, tomorrow, and for the months foreseeable to come. And I would like just to give a quick acknowledgement to Senator Roger Roth. He was the lead author as well as sponsor of one of the largest advancements in school choice, which was passed in both the Senate and House earlier this year to expand school choice, remove income limits, and make it universal so that all families have access to a quality education, regardless of zip code. That was unfortunately vetoed by the governor. However, we're staring down at what is ultimately going to be a brighter future here. So, as said, we want to be your partners, and I want to take this time to offer you something that, you know, clearly other speakers did much better. I can't be as inspirational as Scarlett or Bonnie or the rest of the gang that spoke before me here, but we do have quite a few resources that we would like to leave you with, and I can direct you to my colleague Calvin Lee over there, who has a number of flyers that will direct you to our website, where we have an extremely comprehensive toolkit that will provide all of you the necessary elements that you could take to be a warrior out there for the kids and for educational advancements. And I'll again reference the senator here in the crowd, that this is incredibly important. So whether you find your passion talking to the media, to talking to your state legislator, or just going out on social media and talking to your peers, your families, your friends and neighbors, this is how we're going to continue to grow. We want to be able to assist you along the way, because at the end of the day, it is you who are going to drive this movement, and we look very much forward to continue to be your friend and ally in this fight. So please feel free to say hello after the meeting, and we'll be sure to provide you with everything that you need going forward. Thank you.
Justin, thank you. By the way, I heard Luke call you Allie. Do you go by Allie?
Sometimes.
Or do you prefer Alexandra?
Whatever everyone's comfortable with.
Okay.
Kind of roll with anything.
Well, I'll go with Alexandra because I haven't met you yet to call you Allie. Our next speaker is Alexandra Schweitzer. She's the president of the Wisconsin chapter of No Left Turn in Education. And as I mentioned, I know a little something about this organization, founded by a woman called Ilana Fishbein out of the Philadelphia area. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but Ilana started this about 3 years ago or so. And it was when she really, it was well before COVID, and then it was really before, I think, the gender issue was really on a lot of people's radar. It was on hers, and it's exploded. I know you'll talk more about it. I'm excited to hear. No Left Turn is on a mission to revive the fundamental discipline of critical and active thinking in education based on facts, investigation, logic, sound reasoning. Go figure. Not political propaganda. Alexandra has been standing up to her local school board a lot over the last year, raising concerns about age-inappropriate materials being used in the classroom without proper parental notification. When Alexandra spoke up about these concerns, her school board, we all know this by now, tried to bully her into silence. But she is not the kind that's going to back down, so we welcome her to the podium now, Alexandra Schweitzer.
Thank you. And I'm from Oconomowoc. I noticed you didn't try and say that.
They didn't even bother putting that in.
Yeah, I noticed so. No. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the Herzog Foundation for inviting me. As you know, my name is Alexandra Schweitzer. I am the president of the Republican Women of Waukesha County, and I'm also the chapter president of No Left Turn in Education here in Wisconsin. I'm also a fierce defender of our students' right to an education and a true believer that the parent is the primary educator of the child. I wanted to take a moment to publicly thank and acknowledge the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty. I would not be standing here tonight without the fierce defense of will. Luke Berg, who's here with us tonight, was one of the attorneys on my case. I am forever grateful to Rick Essenberg, Libby Sobik, Corey Brewer, Luke, and the entire team for their extraordinary defense. They were formidable. Never once did they go down any path but parental rights, taxpayer rights, and most importantly, the Americans' right to the First Amendment. Now a little about myself. I am the daughter of a legal immigrant to this country, my courageous mother crossing 2 continents to get here, and my father an American-born Irish-Italian. I learned to make the food of the Orient from my mother's mom. I listened to the stories and learned the art of debate from my granddad. My father's father taught me the love of music as he would sing, filling my parents' home with the majesty of one of the finest tenors I have ever heard. As my nonna took my hands and taught me how to make pasta. I stand here tonight representing my parents, grandparents, my children, all of our students, my husband, and the dreams we have for our children, the future of this country, and you, the American patriot. Education in America in 2022 is the hot topic. When we talk about it, we must not forget that education of the citizen was important to even our nation's first generation of leaders. Our 17th president, Andrew Johnson, signed into legislation creating the first Department of Education. The main purpose was to collect information and statistics about the nation's schools, but it was quickly demoted to the Office of Education as there was growing concern that the department would exercise too much control over our schools. It is very telling that in 1868, President Andrew Johnson would warn of overreaching local officials taking over the schools parents entrusted our children to. This lies in stark contrast to public schools today, where we see school boards engaged in bully tactics. They look to control the child, deny the realities that the parent is the primary educator of the child, and the school system is there to support the parent, not replace the parent. Across this majestic land, parents are threatened by school districts. Their own taxpayer money is used against them for the simple notion that the parent knows what is best for their own child. On a seemingly regular basis, threats of legal consequences come to parents who voice concerns on how districts handle discipline, what is and isn't acceptable speech inside of a taxpayer-funded school building, and the latest trend of absolutely no debate allowed of any kind in the classroom. On May 13th of this year, I personally learned the consequences of asking questions to my local school board and questioning the educational materials used in our classrooms. I was served a cease and desist. I was told that I should cease and desist from demanding parental rights. I was told that I should cease and desist asking for all students to receive an education, not an indoctrination. I was told that I should cease and desist from exercising my First Amendment right. I should just keep my mouth shut and leave education and the curriculum our students are exposed to the professionals in charge of such decisions. But to understand how the cease and desist happened, you have to understand my experience with the public education system. I have 3 children, 11, 13, and 18. My oldest has never stepped foot inside of a public school building as an academic student. My husband and I believed we were giving her the best education our money could afford to give her. We were left bitterly disappointed by the radically left school system, one we simply did not agree with. My 2 younger children have bounced from school to school, as I desperately sought an education, not an indoctrination for them. Private to public, back to private. We even tried a public charter, and now they will return to private. My middle daughter attending 3 schools in 3 years, she is now poised to return to the private school that mercifully opened their doors in 2021, when the public schools simply would not. She has never been able to make connections because of needlessly long school closures, mask mandates, vaccine discrimination, and the cruelty of middle school. Her time in public school during the quarantine phase of the last 2 years is when all chaos set in. She was in 5th grade and she would be finished with her schoolwork without help from a teacher within 45 minutes. She was told that she could talk to her math teacher during office hours, which would quickly come, and then the children would be dismissed because he was busy babysitting his kids. My daughter learned nothing. She ended the year like the rest of the state. She leveled up, having not earned the advancement, through no fault of her own. I was stunned to learn that my son, who was then in 3rd grade, was spending more time looking for Waldo than learning the 3 R's. For the 2020 school year, my son was treated differently by the students because he was not wearing a mask. He was often told to sit in the hall and learn from there, or isolated alone at a desk until I became a stronger advocate in the community and helped parents across our district get masks off their children. It was in the early days of the pandemic that parents had our eyes open to what was being taught, what was not being taught, and more importantly, how our children were being groomed. It was in July of 2021 when the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty here in Waukesha, working with concerned parents in the Elmhurst School District, discovered questionable books inside the district. This wasn't a big budget Hollywood extravaganza movie where books like The Catcher in the Rye were burned and today's youth wanted to have a dance party. These books were sexually graphic and intentionally confusing, with cartoonish figures of men and women having sexual intercourse in every plausible partnership one can imagine. These books were readily available, depending on the district, in the school library, in the classroom, and hidden on apps on the students' Chromebooks. These books were referred to the mother as, quote, birthing person. And our youngest minds were told that their gender identity was not what was, quote, assigned to them at birth. It was what the child felt like it should be. In other words, if the child decided on a Monday that he or she wanted to be a building brick, then he or she was indeed a building brick. This goes far beyond the case of a toddler pretending to be a dinosaur or Ralphie eating his dinner like a dog. These are mind-altering books that coach our kids that there is a whole spectrum of possibilities when it comes to gender selection. Upon learning about the availability of these books, available to students like my son, I started to ask questions of my local school district about how they plan to resolve this issue. Many of these questions have yet to be answered. Then later in the school year, I was contacted by multiple parents in my district and specifically asked about a book called The 57 Bus. excerpts which were being read aloud in an 8th grade class, and much time was being dedicated during ELA to the very controversial gender sexual identity issues currently being discussed in this country. I was told that this book was used as a teacher manual and available to teachers only. This book was used without proper parental notice or consent given. Research has shown that sexually explicit books have led to mental damage, drug addiction, prostitution, suicide ideation, thoughts, tendencies, and tragically completed. So just as a side note, just this morning, I was able to find the 57 bus on the Oconomowoc School District through them, through the Sora app, which they say has been removed from the Chromebooks, but with the students' ClassLink login, you can go to soraapp.com, take your students' information and log in, and find the 57 bus, and I stopped after about 150 books that are still available in Oconomowoc. In February of this year, I was invited to testify in front of the Senate committee hearing on behalf of parental rights. Roger was there. I spoke about age-inappropriate materials like the 57 bus. They were available to our students. I asked the teachers and administrators and elected officials why they felt they had a right to sexually educate our students with little or no consent. I asked why our elected officials, who are there to represent us, the administration and the staff, felt it was incumbent on them to have controversial conversations with our children without our consent. During this time, I contacted the local school board president. I directly quote his answer to me. The discussion we had months ago was to review the selection of library materials, standards, and how we can refine that to our community, not academia standards. We commit to using transparency and communication to help our parents know what is in their kids' backpacks. I believe this because there is no single standard for appropriateness, and I believe in the First Amendment. I was left bewildered by this statement, as distribution of pornographic materials to children and the sexual education of students without parental consent is in fact not protected by the First Amendment. In the May 13th cease and desist letter, I was told that my direct quote of Mr. Wood was defamatory. In the response that was given, my attorneys pointed out that my statement was referring to a text and email exchange between Mr. Wood and I, where the books that parents had contacted me about relaying their concerns was in fact not defamatory. I was also told that transparency is alive and well in Oconomowoc School District. When I questioned further, I was ignored. To date, I have yet to receive an answer or even an acknowledgement of the emails. This does not bode well when discussing transparency. I also questioned the board president about the board's public statement pertaining to the age-inappropriate materials accessible on students' Chromebooks. I reminded him that as recently as August 2021, the board publicly stated. Now, I'm quoting Mr. Wood directly here, the bad grammar and all, so bear with me. After reviewing the digital subscription to the district has decided to discontinue the Sora. The decision was made due to the lack of personalized to align with our OASD selection process and age guidelines. We're in the process of reviewing these procedures to include parent permissions for access to the young adult collections. If you wanted to come up here and read porn to us, please don't. We've already took action on that, we get it. It's important that parents are aware of what's getting in front of their kids. We're working as a district to put that front and center. Thank you for bringing to our attention, and just know we are listening. I was hopeful that the issue had been resolved and no further action was required. And with that intent, I open records requested a comprehensive book list from the school district in September of 2021. I was given an incomplete list. I received library books, but that did not include any books accessible through the Chromebooks online library, including the much discussed Sora app or textbooks used by the teachers. Instead of addressing the important topic of age-inappropriate materials accessible to students, the district's lawyers accused me of misinformation. I've yet to receive a response from any member of the school board to my numerous questions. I filed an open records request as to what was available to the students. I have yet to hear back. I am still hearing from families with concerns about the materials their children have access to. My intention is to find the truth, to support the parents, to remind we the people that these are our kids. These are our taxpayer dollars, and these elected officials work for us. The schools exist to educate the child, not to employ adults. Because for adults, teaching is optional, but for a student, learning is essential. We have come to a period in our glorious nation's history where a parent has to have permission to see their child in school, where we, the parent, are shamed for asking a question about lesson plans and ridiculed for raising our children in our image, their sexual education in line with our parental timelines, not the union's school boards and teachers. To quote the great President Donald Trump, "We have faith in our hearts, grit in our souls, and courage in our veins." I stand here today to put that fire in your belly and remind all of us that together, we the parent can right this wrong. I stand before you tonight as a parent to remind all of us that we can and must do better. We must never forget that the indelible American spirit is not something that we surrender at the door of our children's schools. I am here tonight to let you know that you are not alone. I stand with you. The army of Americans across this country that have recently reached out to me, they stand with you. Our children deserve better. Our future deserves better. Our country deserves better. Together, we can and must remind the elected officials that we will never co-parent with the government. We are at the cusp in our nation's history. Our time is now. We, the parent, either take back our rights as parents or we don't. We, the people, either set boundaries and tell the establishment no more or we don't. This is our moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you tonight who spoke. I hope, if I may, we can book each and every one of you on the show because you're all fantastic and I think everybody should hear from you. So thank you. Thank you for your fire. I will just say before we turn it over to our closing speaker tonight that like these parents, my wife Christine and I think often, sometimes I will speak for myself and say we battle with a little bit of bitterness and anger and hostility, but because of what's been done to our children. All of us have a similar story about how our children have been, in some way, shape, or form, really hurt deeply by the public education system. And the good news is, God is not surprised by any of this, and there has been a great awakening in this country because of it, and the good people in this room are an example of God's hand in this, and we're at work. We're all at work. He's at work, and very good things are ahead. I feel that. So I want to thank you for being such wonderful hosts to my wife Christine, me, and I hope you'll check out that podcast, Making the Leap, as I turn it over to a great friend. He is the president of the Herzog Foundation for over 30 years. He pastored a church in St. Joseph, Missouri. See, it's so easy. In Missouri, we have towns that you can pronounce. His name is Darrell Jones, the president of the Herzog Foundation. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, Chris is from Kearney. Is it Kearney, Chris? Chris is in Kearney, Missouri. It has been such a treat to be with you tonight. I've been encouraged by your fire and by your passion, and I will just tell you, as the leader of a nationwide foundation that's focused on advancing Christian education K through 12 across the United States. What's happening, the fire, the fervor in this room is exponentially taking place around the country. You're not alone. You may seem like you're alone. You're not alone, and you're in a very important fight. And I just want to tell you on behalf of the entire Herzog Foundation, our board of directors, our fantastic team, and really the legacy of Mr. Herzog, who gave really these marching orders as the mission: advance Christian education. We're willing and desirous to partner with you in whatever capacity that we can. We've pretty much identified 3 real lanes that are our focus. One is to help Christian families recognize that the school system that, as Stan would call the government schools, are not the same school district that you grew up in. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to educate parents, Christian parents specifically, on the reality of what's going on, both in Christian school. If you think that Christian education is glorified vacation Bible school, you may want to give it a second look. It is quality education that embraces and doesn't attack your Christian faith. Now there's a novel idea. And in addition, we're also highlighting, we feel like we have a responsibility as an organization to call out the absurdities of what Stan would call the government system. And I will simply tell you, the National Education Association has helped us do more to start Christian schools than anything that we could possibly do on ourselves. And that's absolutely true. And so trying to educate families on the reality of Christian education in light of the status quo, readlion.com. Readlion.com is our online news magazine to help do that. We're cranking out 8 to 10 articles every single day, highlighting anything that has to do with Christian education. Education, K through 12 education generally, but Christian education specifically. Readlion.com. We launched that last August and have over a reach at this point of over 2.5 million on a daily basis. So God has really given us amazing favor. I will simply say, and Chris highlighted it so well, God is at work. Not only is it not over, this condition, right? This is the environment where miracles happen. You know, it wasn't until it gets really difficult that Red Seas part and fish and loaves are multiplied and giants fall. There's a worship song that says, when it seems like your world is falling apart, it's really just falling into place. And the reality is Christ is still on the throne and it's not over. So as a foundation, educating parents would be one lane, readlion.com. Another is looking at the over 20,000 Christian schools in the country and seeing how we can help strengthen them internally. We have found that so many Christian educators lack really good professional development in the skill set necessary to run a business, to run a small business. And so through our leadership development series, we are focused on, if you as an educator in a Christian school can get to our conference, our 2 or 3 day conference, we will bring in the experts on our dime, we will get the venue on our dime, we will host you, we will put you in a Marriott on our dime, and we will feed you on our dime. And as you can imagine, we have a waiting list every time we do a conference. We started that initiative of our leadership development series back in October of 2021. Since that time, we've educated over 300 educators through the program from 200 different schools and 30 different states. And we have a waiting list every single time, focused on strategic plan, donor development, marketing and enrollment, building a culture, creating a team in your school where teachers want to work when the salary may not be the catalyst to make that happen, as well as succession planning and a whole series that is really focused on helping Christian schools be stronger internally. And then our third initiative, the third lane, would be how can we help create more Christian schools across the country with different financial models that are accessible and sustainable. And so everything from a 1 day a week school co-op to a 2 or 3 day hybrid homeschool cooperative, or a 5 day a week traditional or classical Christian school on August 22nd and 23rd in Loudoun County, Virginia. Perhaps you've heard of it. We will be hosting and launching our official rollout of our third initiative that we call the School Box, which is an online portal to help small groups of people in communities, in churches, who say we have had it, we've had enough, we want a Christian school, but how do we do that? Where do we start? The School Box is an online roadmap to move you from passion to actually launching a school. So once, with the idea that one size doesn't fit all. What kind of school do you want? The School Box will help you do that. And about the halfway through the process, a linear roadmap to launching a school, then as you have vetted yourself by identifying the specific kind of school that you want, The Herzog Foundation will then find a head of school somewhere around the country who's leading that kind of school, and we will pay them on a weekly basis to Zoom call with you and work out the kinks and the details and walk you through the rest of the process. Because what we care about is putting more students in quality Christian education, K through 12, across the United States. So that's our passion, that's our vision. And I thank you so much for coming and being a part of this tonight. If you don't mind, let me pray for you. Would you mind if I give one quick anecdote? I pastored for 35 years. Give me just a, can you give me, what's the old joke when the pastor says, and finally? What does that mean? It means nothing at all, actually. My wife and I flew in, first time ever, to the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. We came in last night. Our plane landed at 11 o'clock last night, and our luggage didn't. So we went to the baggage carousel looking for our luggage that was not there, and we were so frustrated because everything that was important to us for 48 hours, we had no idea what had happened to it. We know where we put it, but we were shocked that what had happened, we had no idea. No one knew what was happening. And I thought, what a beautiful anecdote for why we're here. We've been putting our kids on buses thinking one thing, only to find, what are you doing with my kids? My wife and I started having our grandchildren 9 years ago. My wife and I have 3 beautiful daughters who are all college educated and love Jesus and married to wonderful godly men and producing amazingly beautiful and intelligent offspring. And amazing how that works. And I said, when our very first granddaughter was born, I pray that all of my grandkids go to a Christian school. It's a different day, and you are fighting a very important part, a very important fight. And I want you to know that on behalf of the Herzog Foundation, it's a privilege for us to be able to lock arms with you and stand with you, and let's fight an important fight. Can I pray? Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather with friends, brand new friends, and to hear stories that really, on one hand, break our hearts, and yet on the other hand, give us a resolve and a galvanized attention, seeing the importance of this battle. Your word is very clear regarding your heart for those who would cause little ones to stumble. We take that very seriously. And we pray, Lord, that as families across the country, as pastors around the country are re-envisioning what Christian education looks like within their churches, as families are looking more seriously about what does it mean to be a parent and to raise our children to know and to love you, I pray, Father, that you would give us the boldness and the strength to continue to fight this fight. It's one thing to get our luggage back. We want our kids, and we want the next generation. And we want the education system that enables them to know truth, to have knowledge, but to experience wisdom that only comes from you. So, Lord, for these families and for these leaders across the state of Wisconsin, we pray for your strength, and we pray for your vision, and we pray, Lord, that you would be glorified always, that you would be glorified. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. God bless you. Thank you so much for coming.